Stop. You have to stop because you're ruining everything. You see, it was something I just wanted to take one of the parents that I was child whose child I was working with, and I realized that there was something that was going on that the parent just wasn't getting. You see, the child told me that he desired a relationship with his parents, and it was so unfortunate because the parents didn't necessarily see it that way. They just saw their child being defiant, child pushing back, and all that happened was that there was this beef between the two of them, and every time one side of the party tried to step into a relationship, the other one would just push back. And I think it's so unfortunate because there's so many things in our lives that we have an opportunity to achieve, to experience, to be a part of, and yet we just throw it out because of our egos. And if we could just put our egos aside for a second and say, hey, you know what? It's not about me being right or wrong in this situation. There's a bigger picture here. How can I start to see what's really important? We could really start to see what it is that we can start to do. Because so many people mess their lives up because they have to be right. And we're going to talk about today what are the consequences about us not stepping our ego back, understanding that we don't know it all, understanding that there's always more to be learning, understand that, you know what, sometimes even if we're right, we should just take the hit because in the bigger picture, it's going to be the right move. And it's so interesting because when it comes to egos, of course, on the one hand, nowadays everyone has a little self-esteem and we want to try to build ourselves up. So we have to understand, so how do we really balance this? How can we really balance this understanding of, you know what, there is this idea that we have to build ourselves up, but then again, we have to also put ourselves down sometimes. And it's something that is so interesting because what it really is when we're in a situation and our egos pop up and we have to step up and we have to, or we want to say something, or our egos want to be saying something, all we're really doing is we're scratching this itch. There's an itch. There's, oh my gosh, somebody is pushing back at me, and all of a sudden I have to like scratch the itch. But what's really going on is that it's like poison ivy. You're itching it, and there's like a little bit of relief, but then you're just spreading the poison ivy. It's just going more places, and it's only gonna get itchier and itchier and itchier. And especially when we are proven wrong, or when we get put in our place, because that's how life usually works, we end up getting put in our place. It's even harder to really handle it. And we can start to learn when it is appropriate to step up. These are times where it is appropriate to step up, and when it is appropriate to step down. We can start to really become more. I really believe become more successful because so many people mess themselves up. And there's different things that can happen by somebody having a big ego. And we're going to talk about a few of those different things. But recognizing that if we can start to say, hey, you know what, right now, I'm going to take a step back. Right now, it's not important for me to prove to anybody else that I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z. Then we can really start to have the type of relationship with ourselves and with other people. And so many times people are just self-sabotaging themselves and the relationships because they have to be right. They have to get the last point across. They can't acknowledge the fact that they have to be taking ownership. And if we could just all take ownership, everybody, so then things will be a lot better. And for some reason we can't. We have to put it on other people. And like these parents that I was working with were so pushy for their child to go to therapy to work on his anger issues. And not to say that the child couldn't work on his anger issues, and not to say that the child shouldn't have been in therapy, but it was so obvious from the outside that if the parents would have just worked on themselves, if the parents would have worked on their own communication, their own parenting style, the kid wouldn't have to go to therapy. He wouldn't be so angry. It's like you're trying to push somebody to do something and they just don't want to do it. So yeah, of course they're gonna be angry. It's like, these parents who like force their kids to play certain sports and like the kids don't want to do it, but like their parents are forcing them. So yeah, of course they're going to be angry. It's like, it's obvious. So what is it that we can start to do? How is it that we can start to recognize it? And the first thing we need to realize is that if something's not working, there is a relationship that there's an issue. So then something has to happen. Something has to change. And if we can start to say, how can I change? And that's what I like working on with the clients that I work with, is we try to figure out what we can control, because we can't really control other people. We can't control other circumstances that are happening in the world. But how can I show up? How can I become the best version of myself in the situation and do what I have to do? And as long as I know that I do that, then I'm good. And then, I'm even if the relationship still doesn't work out, but I know I'm doing what I have to be doing. And I remember there was this one time where I still get intense when I play basketball, but there was one time I was in camp, and I was a counselor. So I was a little bit older than, all the campers. And one of the referees came over to me after the game and said, Bennett, like, it's pretty intense. Like, you have to really like tune it down a notch. And I was like, okay, like I was like, I want to like punch you in the face, but like, okay, I understand. Okay, I'll try to work on it. And the next game, same thing happens after the game. He's like, Bennett, you're like really, really intense. And I'm okay. I'm like, you know what? I understand. I get to, too into the game, and and I'm not a talker in negatively, but I just like talking to just because defensively it works out. If you're a basketball guy, you know what that means. But understanding that he kept telling me, Bennett, like you're too intense. I'm like, okay, you know what? Next game, and I had a plan. I'm like, I'm not going to care about winning or losing. I'm just going to care about me like not saying anything, like really not caring. And I'm going to still try to play hard. And I probably won't play as hard because of the intensity that I'm going to put into the game. But then at the end of the day, like I'm going to like really like, I'm not going to talk to any refs. I'm going to be nice to like to the refs, which I'm usually nice. I'm just like intense. So like they just take more offense to it. And what was interesting is that after the end of the game, he said the same thing to me. He's like, Benny, you're too intense. And I'm like, all right, this isn't me, buddy. Because I knew I honestly like didn't care about the game. And I knew that it was coming from his side and he was maybe too sensitive. And that wasn't something that I needed to work on. So at the end of the day, if things aren't working out, yes, we have to take that into reflection. We have to say, hey, you know what? How can I take ownership? How can I change? As opposed to me saying you're too sensitive from the beginning, I was saying, hey, you know what can I do to change? Okay, like I'll try to tune it down a little bit. Okay, well, it's not enough. I'll try to tune it down more and more and more. And then all of a sudden at a certain point, it's like, okay, so like this is really not a me issue. This is a you issue. And I think so many times we get into these situations where we can only control certain things. And if we could start to control that, that's going to be the thing that's going to help us. So understanding that if we have our ego step up and if we have ourselves having to talk back and having to be right all the time, that's going to be something that's going to be extremely difficult for there to be real peace within any of those type of relationships. And I honestly think why it's such a division in America right now, because everybody's egos are everybody has to be right. And because everybody has to be right, there's like such a divide because you're either on one side or the other side. There's no like, yeah, no, I really hear that side of the point. I hear what you're saying. I might disagree with it, but like I hear what you're saying. And because of that, it's really unfortunate because it really tears people apart because people's egos are getting in the way and it's not really what they want. And they might even like do things or say things. And I think it happens in like the government all the time because they have to do it because of like the party that they're associated with, but not because like they really believe in the actual cause, because they might agree with whatever to get passed, but for some reason they nay it, right? They decline whatever it is because like it goes against everything else. And I think it really hurts so many people. I mean, you have people of power and you have people of influence who are making those decisions who are affecting millions of people. So that could be something that could be really detrimental for a lot of different people. So we have to recognize that our egos and how it is that we can step out of it is something that is going to be extremely, extremely important. But so many times you have to realize there is a time and a place, that we should be stepping up and we should say, hey, you know what? I am amazing. I am doing, God's work and I am the best thing since sliced bread. And it's interesting because I made a tweet yesterday on Twitter about this because I do think there's certain times when like your number's called. So just for example, like there's this kid I'm working with and he's on his basketball team, going back to the basketball stuff. And he mentioned to me that he had an opportunity to win the game for his team. And the coach at the end of the game called to play for him. Like he's one of the better players on his team. And the coach called to play for him and he was excited. And he ended up getting fouled, but he ended up missing the free throws at the end of the game. And he was so down and he was so upset. And we spoke about the whole mindset about how we can really take that and really learn from the experience and really believe it. That's a whole nother episode. But what was interesting is that in that moment, when your number is called, when your boss says, hey, you know what, I want you to give the presentation, we have to build ourselves up as if we are the best thing. It's thin sliced bread. Right afterwards, we should be getting the feedback. We should try to get better at it. But understanding if we could step up in a way that doesn't come off as arrogant, doesn't come off as like I'm haughty and I know everything. But for myself, I have this like amazing inner confidence. That is the time that we have to do it. We shouldn't be living our lives like that because I think there are many times we get slapped in the face or other things might be going on and we might not know what's really happening here. But understand if we could step into that at that moment, that could be something that could be really huge. And I think it's this balance of understanding that like I'm good enough right now versus I don't know anything and I need to constantly be a learner. And if we could start to say that to ourselves, we could start to say, hey, you know what? This parenting thing, I had never really had such a good experience. I never really got training. I never really listened to any like lectures or any like, podcasts on it. Maybe, just maybe, I'm doing something a little bit wrong and I should learn about it. Just like if you go into business, like what's interesting about business is that when things don't go right in business, you're like, okay, like people like blaming things, but like even like at the highest level, they're saying, what can I do to change? How can I change? How can I change my strategy? What's my, what can I do with my goals and all this stuff? But when it comes to things that are not as necessarily so tangible, it's like, well, why is my kid so defiant? It's like, because you don't know what you're doing and you've never done it before. So it's not even your fault, but just don't have your ego say that you should be doing these things 100%. And so many times people can't get themselves out of it. And because of that, they are constantly hurting and they're putting themselves and the people around them at risk of ruining whatever it is that they're trying to work on. And so many times, if we could just say, hey, you know what? I need to become a learner. There's always more to learn. I can learn from everybody. That mindset, that shift could be so powerful when it comes to the relationships that we have. Because you know what? It's getting curious about what's going on. It's my kid is being defiant, but like, why is my kid being defiant? It's so interesting. Like, naturally, they're not like that. I remember when they were a kid, they weren't so defiant. So what happened? What do they feel? Are they not being heard? Do they have to get their emotions out? I have a whole YouTube video on, big parent mishaps and how to fix them. But understanding that if we could start to work on different areas of our life to try to say, hey, these are the things that I want to be working on, that can really start to shift. And it starts with us. It starts with us taking ownership. It starts with us taking our ego out of it. And once we do that and we can start to say, hey, you know what? There's always more to be learning. I'm going to constantly be learning from everybody around me. I'll test the waters. I'll see if it works for me. It doesn't work for me. And if I'm not the type of person who says that there's one straight path, right? Everyone has like their own thing that they have to do, and everyone has different personalities, and everyone's got to figure out things for themselves. But what we have to do is we have to try to say, hey, what's going on here? What am I bringing to the table? Am I really prepared for this? And of course, since we could always be prepared, we're never going to be prepared. But understand, am I prepared enough for this moment? And I think another thing that we can start to do is really start to look at the big picture, because I think sometimes we lose focus on what's really important over here. So when a parent, for example, starts to reprimand their kid, they start to punish their kid. So the reason why the parent wants to do it is because they want their kid to change their behavior. But if they see that their kid's not changing the behavior and the kid is just being more defiant, perhaps that might not be the best strategy. And yes, I believe kids should get punished and they should get reprimanded. But understanding that there is probably something else there, or there might have to be a conversation before that happens, so they really start to get the message. They're supposed to just say, you're grounded for the next week, or I'm taking your phone away, or whatever it is going to be. And if we can start to say these different things, then we have that ability to start to say, hey, you know what? There's something different over here. I have the ability to do something different. And by saying that and by doing that, then we have this knowledge of saying, you know what? It's not about this moment of punishing my kid. It's about the relationship. It's not about me being right or wrong in this situation. It's about something bigger than me. And I think if we could start to say that to ourselves, I think that could be something that could be huge in terms of what it is we're working on and how it is we could start to work on ourselves and the things that we want to be working on. And some of the things that happen because of our egos is, number one, self-sabotage. We end up missing ourselves over so many times. We have to be right, and we dig ourselves in this big hole, and we can't get ourselves out, and we end up getting self-sabotage. And it's so unfortunate because we're constantly being hounded and pushed. And if we could just start to say, hey, you know what, let me take a step back, then we won't be messing ourselves over, right? Obviously, relationships get ruined. Business deals get ruined. And different things that we're trying to work on, things that are important to us, get ruined because of our egos. For ourselves, it shunts our own personal growth because we think we know it all. We think that we have everything figured out. And if something goes wrong, it's not me, it's them. All that means is that I have nothing else to work on. And what that means is that you're never going to be growing from that moment. And maybe you did a lot, and maybe you do have a lot, and maybe you do have experience, but there's always room for more. I really believe that. I think there's always room for more. And there's always more you can be doing. And if we can start to say, hey, you know what, there's a lot more here, that's a totally different ballgame than saying I'm good. I know enough. And it's so interesting because so many people don't necessarily think about it like this. But if we could start to do that, then we can start to really move forward with all the stuff that we want. And if we can start to look at this big picture, we can start to say, you know what, I'm going to be a learner over here. I'm not going to put in, I'm going to take my ego out of here. I'm going to be able to put and move myself forward. That's going to be the thing that's going to help us. And we all have the ability to do that. And really all it means is just we need to take a back seat. We need to just shut our mouth. And if somebody starts arguing with us, just, yeah, you're right. And all that's really what it really has to happen. Because so many times we ruin everything around us. We ruin all the stuff that's going on because of our egos. And what's interesting is like the people who listen to this, who understand this, are probably not the ones that need to be doing it. It's the ones who don't get it, the ones who always blame everybody else, the ones who are constantly pointing their fingers at everybody else. It's like their ego that they think they know too much. And if we start to say, you know what, the relationship is more important than me being right in the situation, even with spouses, it's like, I'm sorry, even if you didn't do anything wrong, because more important than me being right in this moment is our relationship and the connection that we could have. And if we could start to do that, if we start to figure out all these different steps in terms of how does we can move back and hold ourselves back from taking that action, then I'm telling you, our lives are going to be totally different. The relationship's going to be different. Our growth, our opportunities are going to be different. People are going to want to be around you. You're not going to be all alone because everyone's just like, oh, this guy's so egotistical. If we could do that, then I really believe it could be something that could hugely change our lives and really take us to the next level. If you have any questions, like always, feel free to reach out, and everyone have a great day. Peace.